I just had to get up each week to get to my football game during the hardest time of my life. And so I would really say my love for football kept me going. I could have caved in that moment and just been like, wow, deadly. Like what? I just feel like the love I got back from college football after pouring my whole life into college football, really 3 decades. I think it saved my life, and I'm not overstating that.
All right, this week's guest, an amazing person in the media and has been a mainstay, a pillar of sorts for college football in particular. She really needs no introduction. She's such a legend and an icon in our game and in our business. But need I say, I will be interviewing the great Holly Rowe. We will be getting into her past, how she got into doing football and sideline reporting. Is a pretty cool story, amongst other things. That she had to fight through some adverse situations in her life as well. How did football play a part in that? You'll get to hear all of that right now, right here on Good in the Game. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Obviously, I have the lovely Holly Rowe with me. This is quite an honor to be able to do this interview. Usually, it's you doing the interviewing. Well, in some cases, you're pretty important, so you do a lot of interviewing as well. But it would have been you interviewing me the last time that we saw each other at the Rose Bowl. So now we're going to role reverse right now.
These are facts. I interviewed you a lot in your career, and so this is kind of cool for me. So I'm excited to see, how far you've come.
All
You were
right.
always so good on the football field, so now I got to see you bring it at this next level.
I'm going to do my best. I felt the pressure of that challenge, but I'll make sure that I try to live up to the expectations. So this is Good in the Game, and it's the National Football Foundation, and it's just all about talking about people who have impacted the game, and the game has impacted them, and the game and the people that have been a part of this amazing sport of football and how it's impacted the communities, how it's impacted so many different genres and categories of people. So who better to have this conversation with than one Holly Rowe? I got to start first question I would love to throw out at you is, coming from the background that you came from and starting in Utah and being at BYU and handling things, did you ever see yourself climbing to the ESPN level and then just legendary status and what you're doing? Take us through the humble beginning of Holly Rowe as it applied to getting into media, because if it didn't happen this way, we wouldn't have got you in football to the level that we ended up. So it's nice to always go back to the beginning.
Yeah, so my beginning was I went to my first college football game when I was 5 years old because BYU was so good back in the day in that era, and my dad was a huge BYU fan, and so I just got obsessed at a really young age. And I just remember, I remember crying when BYU lost their bowl game, and I was like 7 years old, and I just got obsessed with everything BYU football. Those are back in the days of like Gifford Nielsen, Robbie Bosco, Steve Young, like the who's who of legendary quarterbacks, Jim McMahon.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just feel like I was lucky that I paired like some of the best college football we've ever seen with my growing up years. So that was really cool, and really why I got obsessed with college football in the first place. And then just, I couldn't play it. I wanted to be a boy so bad. I remember just in grade school, like, I just want to play football so bad, but I'm doing the next best thing. And so I just wanted to be really good at my job. I think my first big opportunity I got was to cover BYU football.
That is
And
awesome.
and back in that time, BYU was coming off a national championship in 1984. And one of the first quarterbacks I got to really cover his games was Steve Sarkisian, who
Mm,
was a junior college
art.
transfer and came in to start playing. And they had a great year that year, made it to the Cotton Bowl. So I was just lucky. I was around really good ball and around really good coaches like Lavelle Edwards. Ron McBride was at the University of Utah, and he was awesome to me. And so they appreciated just this girl that was obsessed with football, and they were really kind to me and inclusive of me.
How did that play a large part in why you decided to stay at the college level? Like, you're a college media savant. I would assume that background that you just explained would be maybe the catalyst of why college football, and you've done college women's basketball as well, but college football is your jam. That seems like that is really like your deal.
Yeah, people always ask me what's my favorite sport to cover because I've covered like 8 different sports at ESPN, throughout my career there. And I just always say I just feel like college football was my first true love, and so that's always where my heart is. I'm just getting ready. I just started this past week my 30th college football season for
Wow.
ABC and ESPN. So for 30 straight years, I've never missed a Saturday. I've never missed a
Wow.
college football Saturday for 30 straight years. So I love it. I'm obsessed by it. I just had Clemson LSU this weekend, and we're getting ready to kick off, and Clemson's running down the hill. I literally almost start crying every time. Like, I just love college football, and I just can't believe I still get to be a part of it. So I don't know. I'm just obsessed, literally.
It is a very hard business to get into. They think it's hard getting into the business playing the game. It's super, super difficult to crack into the game of the media broadcast side of different things. And as you mentioned, you've had longevity doing it. What was the plan? Like, I would say, because this is so amazing in terms of the parallel of what it takes to be able to actually accomplish and get to where you're trying to go playing the game. A lot of times people don't take into consideration. I always say it's a it's a the threesome. It's the holy trinity of sports is the athlete, the reporter, the media, and the fans. That's the three that you have to have. And two of them really drive pretty much everything that goes as far as the product that the fans are able to consume, and that's the media. How do you see that? Like, how does that how does your beginning and your approach, what could give that type of inspiration, motivation to people aspiring to want to do what you do?
Yeah, I think it's really a good thing of like find out what you love. Like if you are a passionate fan of anything, I think passion is what drives you to work hard. You were like that. I mean, you were one of the most passionate. You were going to die out there. I saw how hard you played every single snap. And that passion drives you. I mean, I have to have a lot of passion to show up in rain, cold, sleet, sun, heat, all the stuff. You got to really, really love it. I don't think I've ever worked a day in my life for the money. So, part of it is your passion. And then, maybe preparation. So I remember kind of how I got my first big break was I was doing local BYU games and Air Force games. We had this old network called the Blue and White Sports Network. And back in that time, BYU and Air Force were like so good. Fisher DeBerry was at Air Force, running the triple wishbone. We called it the fishbone because he had his own
Mm,
Fisher DeBerry spin on it. But
mhm,
ABC Sports came in and took the game, and so we wouldn't get to do the game locally. And I remember looking in the game notes, and it said so and so is going to call the game, and there wasn't a sideline reporter listed. And so I
mhm,
still to this day don't know what I was thinking. Just crazy, overconfident person probably. But I called the producer. I got the producer's number from the sports information director, and I said, "Hey, I was prepared to do this game." This was back in 1995. I said, I'm prepared to do this game. I know all the players. I know the coaches. I'm ready to do this game. I've noticed you didn't have a sideline reporter. And he's like, okay, you can do the game. And like, wow. So being
opportunity.
brave, opportunity, but I was prepared
Yes.
and I figured
Preparation
out.
meets opportunity. I love it.
Yeah. And so I figured out that that was like a D level ABC game, kind of one of their lower echelon games. So I did the game, and then I said to the producer, where is your game next week? And he's like, oh, we're going to have San Diego State at San Jose State next week. I said, oh, that's so crazy. You know what? I'm going to be in San Jose. Of course, I wasn't going to be in San Jose. I think I
Right.
had to take a bus like for $80, 18 hours to get from Salt Lake
Wow.
City, where I live, to San Jose. But I figured out the system of like, if I could get myself there and pay myself to get there, they would let me work. And Marshall Falk was the running back for San Diego State
Wow.
in that game. I'll never forget it. So, just kind of
Amazing.
work your way up. but being prepared, being brave to put yourself out there. And from that moment, what I didn't realize is all those games were on satellite. So all the bosses back in New York
We're
City saw my
seeing it.
work.
Mhm.
And the very next season, I got offered a full package of games. So just that one moment of being brave enough to make a phone call really changed the course of my career.
That is awesome. That's an awesome story. Talk to me about that perseverance, that drive, that what they call the intestinal fortitude to be able to do it. How does that relate to your time of learning about football and being immersed in football and meeting so many different people? How does that compare? And I guess I'll make a two-part to that question. How has Holly Rowe evolved and learned? I mean, meeting all of the people that you meet, interviewing all of the people that you interview, all of those touch points, I can't even imagine how profound the impact on you that would be. But just talk a little bit about it from your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's been a really great education because I'm getting to work with the very best of the best. So, before we came on, I was just looking through my old notes. I was trying to find my notes about you and I couldn't find it, but I did find some of my old Penn State notes. Tom Bradley was the defensive coordinator.
Yep.
He worked at Penn
It's a
State for
long
like
time ago.
27 years. That's a long time
Yeah.
ago.
Yep.
I've got my game notes and all my handwritten notes, going back to the early 2000s when you were
Wow.
playing. I have pages. I probably have 40 pages or more of notes from Joe Paterno, for example.
Wow.
So like I was learning from the best of the best in college football coaches. Nick Saban, I've written down every word he's ever said to me. People like that. But even more than that, like X and O stuff. So I'll give you a great example. I remember the 3-2-5 came in vogue, like with this
Mhm.
offense, with only three defensive linemen, two linebackers, five DBs. And an old coach named Joe Lee Dunn started that way back in the day. And like I would study the 3-2-5, and I've got my notes from Joe Lee Dunn on how he came up with that and where that started. I remember when the zone read became popular, and Rich Rodriguez talking to me about how he was coaching at Glenville State. And one day the quarterback forgot to hand it off on this kind of sweep play. And he's like, "Why didn't you hand it off right there?" And he's like, "Well, I was reading the defensive end, and the defensive end
Went with
didn't
the ball
crash."
forward. Right.
Yeah. And
Oh,
so
it
I
didn't
knew I
crash.
could keep it and go in.
Right.
And
Right.
so he's like, "Oh, you were reading the end. Well, let's play with that." And so they really started that zone
Wow.
read of reading the defensive end of, do I keep it? Do I hand it off? Or do I throw it? So like I've just gotten to be behind the scenes and hear the inception. Oh, another good one. So I got really obsessed. Right now the air raid offense, I would say 70% of schools right now are running some form of the air raid offense. So I went back and I did an interview with Hal Mummy, who started that air raid offense.
I went against
And
Hal Mummy when he was at Kentucky.
of course, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yep.
so he was actually a high school coach at that time. He was watching, all things come back to BYU with their good offense. He was watching the Holiday Bowl where BYU came back. I think they scored 3 touchdowns in 4 minutes to beat the great Pony Express SMU team with Eric Dickerson and Craig James. And he said, to this day, those passing routes that BYU used in that game with Jim McMahon, those passing routes were the formation of our air raid. Like we still call it the same thing.
Wow.
And he said he got a guy from the Canadian Football League who ran the hurry up tempo stuff. And so he started putting in a 2-minute drill all the time in football. So like you just get all these little gems and really cool things along the way of why things are popular in college football, how they stay, why they're invented the way they are. And I just get really obsessed with all of that.
What has football meant to you as a person? I mean, I know there's a lot to that question because obviously knowing that you have gone through what you have gone through in terms of your own needing to persevere and get through, hard times like a football season. We all have seasons in our lives. Um, your life has been so parallel to the game. What what has football meant to you?
Whew, that's I don't want to cry because I probably will, but I mean, I can make an argument that football saved my life.
Wow.
Um, I was going through, you mentioned I had a really tough battle with stage 4 metastatic melanoma. 11 days before the college football season, I found out that I had new inoperable tumors in my lungs. And, the doctor said to me, this could be a death sentence. You need to start preparing for this. This is going to be hard. And I didn't tell anybody. I just knew that I just had to keep going to work and showing up to games. So my first game was Notre Dame at Texas, sold out. First time Notre Dame had played at Texas in forever. And I didn't tell my bosses, that I was sick, that I had this new kind of deadly diagnosis. And I went and I worked the game, and I had a wig on. I was out there sweating in 105 degrees with my wig because I was bald at the time, for my chemo. And I just had to get up each week to get to my football game during the hardest time of my life. And so I would really say my love for football kept me going. I could have caved in that moment and just been like, wow, deadly, like what? And I got really lucky because I got on this immunotherapy drug that was a clinical trial. The V Foundation set me up in this clinical trial, and it saved my life. But that season was the hardest thing I've ever done because the treatment, like I could barely walk, my joints and everything hurt so bad, but I would work those football games. And in that, I got a lot of love from people, like Coach Saban and his wife, Miss Terry, sent me box of apples. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. And I would be on the field, and coordinators, officials, fans, random people would come up to me and be like, we're praying for you. And I just feel like the love I got back from college football after pouring my whole life into college football, really 3 decades, I think it saved my life. And I'm not overstating that.
You gave me some, and that's an amazing response, and it's an amazing thing to see because I remember when they had announced it. I don't know how far that was from when everything took place in terms of you persevering, but I remember when they announced it and they said that you were going, be fighting for it, and it was just like, man, it just the feelings you feel when one of your own, you're part of our family, like it's a family thing. But I remember distinctly, like when I saw that report, and I was like, man, I just was throwing out a lot of positive energy and prayers to you for a speedy recovery. So it's awesome that I mean your report is you're doing well. I mean you've been
Doing
doing well
great.
for a while now.
Yeah, I just had a clean scan 2 weeks ago, and they've just moved me into the survivorship program.
That's
So
awesome.
I'm healthy. I'm doing really great. But I mean, that just means the world to me to hear you say I'm part of your family. Like
Absolutely.
that I get to be part of LaVar Arrington's college football family. Do you know how cool that is for me? I watched so much of your career, and I know every time I've seen you, we've had a great rapport, and you've been so
Indeed.
cool to me for many, many years. So
Indeed.
I thank
Indeed.
you for giving me that honor.
Oh man, I think I share the sentiments of us all. To be honest with you, I mean everybody who knows you and has seen your work and have been a part of you, you do it the right way, and it's again, I think that that's why it's so important to hear these stories on these different platforms. And I guess my next question would be, in doing what you're doing, what have you seen in terms of the change in landscape? Because we mentioned family, like these new school cats, they're wired a little differently than the older school, old school type of guys. There's a little difference there in how they manage things. How have you had to evolve in terms of how you interact with today's NIL, athletes and players? And not that they're all NIL players, but it certainly is a different day and age in terms of how these young men are approaching the game and approaching their careers.
Yeah, I went through a phase where I was kind of mourning like the good old days, the days where you did it for pride and for pride of your school and for your teammates. Because right now it does feel a little mercenary is too strong of a word, but like who's going to pay me the most money? And I don't love that
Mercenary,
feeling.
mercenary.
Right. I don't
It's
love that
that's yeah,
feeling.
yeah.
But I know that we've got to change. And I believe that young people are putting their bodies on the line every time they step on the football field. And so if anybody's going to get paid, I want it to be the kids on the field. And for a long time, it was the administrations and the coaches and the schools were reaping all that money. I want it to be the kids. I think that's fair and I think that's right. I think how we go about it's really important because I don't want to lose the feeling of teams. So let me give you an example. We just had TCU on Monday night. Josh Hoover is their quarterback. He had a
Mhm.
really good year last year, and people came after him. And he told me a story about he was on the golf course golfing, and his agent called him and said, "Hey, Tennessee wants to talk to you." Right? And Tennessee's going to pay good money because they've just lost Nico Iamaleava at this crucial moment. And he said, "No, I don't want to talk to them." I stood in front of this team in January before spring football and said to my teammates, "I will be here." And so if I leave now in the spring portal, what kind of man will I be? So,
Mm.
for every story that we hear that it might make you feel discouraged about team and pride for the school and so forth, there's 100 stories of young people who want to have character and stand by their teammates and do it for something bigger than themselves. Like, you won't be a good football team if you're just all people trying to get paid. You'll be a good football team if you're doing it for something bigger than yourself. And that can still exist in college football, and I
Sure
absolutely
can.
believe it.
Yeah.
I'd say the other way I've changed is social media changes a lot. You're going to die. I did an interview with a young person today, plays for Oklahoma. He's really big on TikTok. And I saw this stuff over the weekend where people were saying TikTok's ruining college football because you see all the kids on TikTok doing their
Mhm.
dances, whatever.
Mhm.
And so I said, do you think TikTok's ruining college football? He's like, no, that's how I got a big platform and got a lot of followers that helps me get paid because these kids feel pressure now to have a platform, which means
Mhm.
followers on social media. So companies will sponsor them. And I said, how much time are you spending with this? He said, like 15 minutes a week. It's like, it's not like we're just sitting around doing this all day and it's taking our focus off. He said, it's something that I do with my teammates. I actually feel like it bonds us together. So I can't believe I'm sitting here having a conversation before Michigan, Oklahoma with a young linebacker about TikTok. Like
Wow. Right.
it's just funny, but I want to adapt and I want to tell these stories and be fair to these young people
Sure.
with what matters to them. So,
Mhm.
I think we all have to adapt. There's a lot that's different that I don't love, but I'm going to adapt. I'm
Mhm.
going to because I love the game.
That's awesome. All right, my last question for you is what is Holly Rowe? What's her legacy? What do you want your legacy to be as it applies to this game? Good in the game. What was your water drop into the well for this game?
Oh, okay. So good in the game. I hope that my legacy is that I was always fair and fun, and that everybody that I've covered, so many people in college football, I hope that I've impacted their life in a positive way, told good stories about you and your families, honored you and your families, and really done it the right way, as you say. I hope that's how people will remember me and think of me because it has meant something to me for people like you to open up and share your story and share things that are personal and intimate and vulnerable for other people. I want you guys to feel like I stewarded your story well. And then I also want my legacy to be that I was freaking resilient, that I showed up every Saturday for 30 years, plus more. Let's put that out into the universe. That I showed up is I was there. I cared, and I didn't care about being on TV. I cared being at a college football game, and I hope that matters to people that I loved it that much.
Holly Rowe. I loved it.
Loved
Amazing.
it.
I hope
Thank
I did all
you.
right. I wanted to be conversational. I had my
So
prepared
good.
questions, but I just feel like sometimes the best way to go about doing it is just letting it breathe. Like let's just have a conversation like we were just sitting on our own. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate you giving the time. And like I said, there are a handful of people that you look at and they've impacted the games in the different places that they've impacted it. And you're on one of those short list categories of people
Mhm.
that have really been impactful. So just to be able to have your words and to be able to put them within this podcast is super, super, super humbled, super honored, and can't sing your praises enough about the standard that you set and how you go about your business and how you cover the game. So some of us as former athletes, we actually look at it and we pattern ourselves. You got to think, how do you make yourself better? And then once you identify who's the better, then you learn from them. And you've been one of those people. For me, as someone who's in this broadcast business, interviews and different things like that, it's I've taken some of your ways you adopt certain things from certain people. And one of those things are you make people feel comfortable when you're talking to them. So thank you for that, Holly Rowe.
Well, you made me feel comfortable today, and
Good.
I'm grateful. When they said, "Will you do this?" It's going to be LaVar. I was like, "Oh, if it's LaVar, I'll do it. I'll do it."
Awesome.
I love him so much, and
I appreciate it.
2000. That's one of my early years coming to Penn State.
Yeah.
So you guys were
Yeah.
always so good to me when I was young and just getting started. So I wanted to honor you too. So
That's
thank
beautiful.
you.
Well, everybody, that's Holly Rowe. And there you have it. That's National Football Foundation's Good in the Game. And yes, we certainly heard a lot that was good in the game as it applies to one of our legends. Make sure you check her out. She's one of the sideline reporters on CBS and does her thing on ESPN as well. Make sure you check her out. And if you catch her on social media as well, make sure you told her you caught the podcast. All right. Till next time, everybody, I'm LaVar Arrington. That is Holly Rowe. Thanks, Holly.